Nice buns, soft, fluffy, and ultra-low net carbs. Discover Hero Bread, the delicious, ultra-low net carb bread with incredible taste and texture. Hero Bread has 0 grams of sugar and is under 100 calories per serving. Plus, high in fiber with 5 to 10 grams of protein per serving. Order from hero.co now and get 10% off your first purchase with promo code AH10. That's 10% off with code AH10. HERO.co.
This is
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's about to be another impeachment trial. This will be a little bit different, of course, because the president is now former. And who better to talk to than our dear friend, no stranger. He's a senior correspondent with Vox right now, but he is the author of Injustices, the Supreme Court's history of comforting the comfortable and afflicting the afflicted. We should also mention he was formerly with Think Progress. He was well known there. He also clerked for Judge Eric L. Clay of the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. So he knows of what he speaks. Our dear buddy, Ian Millhiser, is back with us to help start off this first month of the new year. Hey, man, how are you doing?
I mean, I'm doing as well as I can, considering that I've been seeing the internal walls of my own home for way too much this year.
Yeah, it's driving us all crazy, but hey, might as well get used to it. Looks like we'll be doing this a while longer.
Yeah,
it would seem. So yeah, man, you're the perfect person to talk to. So what happens now? You got a former president,
right? Was
the impeachment clause meant to do that?
So the short answer is that no one knows for sure. There isn't a clear precedent for an impeachment of a former official, and then there have been former officials who've been impeached, but there's no clear precedent for someone being convicted. And if you read the scholarship, while most scholars think that Trump can still have an impeachment trial after he's left office, there's disagreement among scholars. That said, I think there's a very strong argument that he is susceptible to impeachment. There's lots of reasons why, but one of the biggest reasons why is that the Constitution provides 2 possible consequences that can come out of an impeachment trial. One is removal from office, and obviously Trump can't be removed from office because there is no office to remove him from right now. But the other consequence is that someone can be permanently disqualified from ever holding office again. And so that's what's really at stake here is it's not just some symbolic, let's all say that this guy was really bad now that he's gone. The question is whether there's going to be enough votes in the Senate to say he can never run again. He's disqualified from being the Republican candidate in 2024. And, we can look forward to him cooling his heels in Florida for a while.
So I'm sure that's probably going to take up a lot of time in the trial. His side is going to argue that he's disqualified. I mean, it kind of doing it this way, doing it after the fact, not that they had a choice, but it gives them an opportunity to make that argument, doesn't it?
That's right. And that's what I think is probably the real purpose of this argument, that it's somehow unconstitutional to move forward with an impeachment of a former official, which is that it doesn't have to be right or not. It doesn't really matter what the scholars say. What matters is that if you're a Republican senator and you want to vote to acquit, but you don't want to go on record and say, well, I'm voting to acquit because I'm scared of Donald Trump or because what I think he did was fine or whatever, you now have an excuse. And your excuse is you could say, oh, I think it is unconstitutional to convict a former official. And, if you don't get the 2/3 to convict, you need a 2/3 supermajority to convict, and a senator can vote not to convict for any reason, even for a made up reason. So, that might be enough to save Trump's hide here.
That's interesting. Now I'm beginning to wonder if that was not the strategy, for Republicans to argue to postpone this just so they can make this argument. I felt like this thing should have just gone. They should have gone right into it. Frankly, that's me. I don't know how you feel about that, but I would have gone right into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think realistically it would have been very difficult to hold an impeachment trial before he left. So, the timeline here is that on January 6th, you had the putsch at the Capitol, and that and Trump's encouragement of that attack on the Capitol is what inspired the second impeachment. The vote to impeach him happened in the House 1 week later. And at that point, there was only, less than a week left, or I guess about exactly a week left in the Trump presidency. And so, potentially they could have moved. They could have moved a little faster. I mean, it didn't help that Mitch McConnell had, the Senate was away, and Mitch McConnell didn't take steps to bring the Senate back right away. But realistically, like even if they had started the next day, even if they had started on January 16, I think it would have been difficult to hold a trial in that period and to go through all those steps. And then, and you have to bring in the Chief Justice, and the Chief Justice has to preside if Trump is still president. And it would have been a lot to do it that quickly. Should they have done it quickly? Yeah, I think the Senate should have been brought back, but I don't know if it would have been possible to go through all the steps in just a few days.
So is one of the arguments then for this to happen after he's left also the argument that the Constitution says removal and disqualification? That second punishment, so to speak, is what makes this plausible, because that's another conviction.
Right. Yeah. So the textual argument is like you said, the Constitution says that someone who's impeached can be removed from office and they can also be disqualified. And so that, because the Constitution explicitly says there's two possible punishments, that suggests that even if you can't remove someone, an impeachment trial could still move forward because there's always this other punishment that could be on the table. And then there's some other arguments why. There's an historical argument that the American impeachment power derives from the British impeachment power, the power that Parliament had to impeach British officials. And there are plenty of historical examples. In fact, while the Constitution was being written, British Parliament was actively in the middle of an impeachment trial against the former Governor General of India. So under the British system, which we based our system on, it was legal to impeach and to move forward with an impeachment trial against a former official. And then there's also just a practical argument, which is that if you can't impeach and convict a former official and then disqualify a former official, then it potentially nullifies the Congress's ability to disqualify someone. Because if I've been impeached and I'm like sitting watching the Senate vote and I'm like, oh, wait, they got 62 votes against me. They got 63 votes against me. They need 67. That number keeps counting up. At some point, I can say, you know what? I'm going to resign at the very last minute. And now I'm a former official, so you can't impeach me anymore and you can't disqualify me. So there's just a practical argument that officials shouldn't be able to thwart the disqualification power in that way.
Yeah, by jumping out early. What is not well known, but I'm sure is well known by you, public doesn't know, is that impeachment trials happen frequently, especially when it comes to judges and whatnot. They just aren't covered in the news. Okay, they happen. Has there ever been a precedent, let's say, in a trial for a judge?
So there's been about, this will be, I think, the 21st impeachment in American history. The last time an official was removed from office was Judge Thomas Porteous. That was in 2010. So, I mean, fairly recently, there's a lot of senators in office now who were there for that trial. The one precedent I know of for something like this, where there's a former official, happened in the 1800s. Secretary of War William Belknap was impeached after he resigned. There was a bribery scandal. He left after the scandal emerged. He was impeached anyway. And then what happened in the Senate, I think, is a pretty unclear precedent. Because what happened is a majority of the Senate voted that, yes, this trial can move forward, even though he's left office. And a majority of the Senate voted to convict Belknap. But you need a 2/3 supermajority to convict. And a core minority of senators said, we are not going to convict because we think that it is unconstitutional to convict a former official. So, like, there is that one precedent, but I think it cuts both ways. Do you say, well, a majority of the Senate said it's okay, and so we should respect what the majority says? Or do you say, well, they didn't have enough votes to convict, even though that means that the precedent you're relying on is the precedent that was set by a tiny minority of the senators during the Belknap trial?
Interesting. But, obviously, these trials are political. They don't run by the letter of the law as an average criminal trial. It just seems to me that even for senators who are Republicans, who are concerned about his wrath or whatever, the Democrats kind of done them a favor by creating an opportunity for them to vanquish him.
Yeah.
Let's deal with facts. He was not their golden child. He was not their first choice. He kind of took over the thing, and now they're all scurrying and beholden to him. The worst thing that could happen for the Republican Party would be for him to form this new party, Ian. And there'll be a permanent split in the base, and Democrats will win every election from now on. Now, that may be what I want, but it just seems to me that this is a gift handed to them to say, okay, we can't remove him, but we can disqualify him from running for office.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I think, that is what the politics are, is that on the one hand, like, if Trump is not disqualified, I mean, he's probably the front runner to be the Republican nominee in 2024. And Trump is not a particularly strong presidential candidate. I mean, he underperformed what the political science fundamentals said that a Republican candidate should have received in 2016. A lot of world leaders actually got polling boosts out of the COVID pandemic because there's this kind of a rally behind the flag effect that happens in a time of national crisis. Trump did not. And so, Trump is a weak presidential candidate. I mean, he could still potentially win in 2024, but if I want there to be a Republican president, I do not want Trump to be the nominee because he is more likely to lose than a replacement level Republican. Yeah. And so, Republican senators, you would think that might be on their mind. The flip side, I think, is that a lot of them are just absolutely terrified of Trump, and they don't want him campaigning against them, and campaigning for their primary challengers.
Yeah. But the guy doesn't have any more social media.
Right.
The media is finally getting on board late in terms of jettisoning their fascination with him every minute of every day. So far. We hope that stays the case. So, I mean, that's really a hostage situation. And especially if, because we're talking about the political consideration, but what's the saying, Ian, the lawyer about lawyers? I can't remember it. If the facts are against you, you argue.
If the facts are against you, you argue the law. If the law is against you, you argue the facts. And if both are against you, you pound the table.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is what this, but this is facts on top of facts.
Right.
You don't even need witnesses. Everybody in the world saw what happened on January 6th. I think you called it a pooch, didn't you? Did you call it a pooch?
Yeah, a putsch. Yeah. It was a violent uprising against the legitimate government of the United States.
That's a Russian word, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a German word. I mean,
Oh, it is. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But anyways, like, I mean, and not just did everyone witness it, but you know who really witnessed it? The senators. They were the ones who were chased out by this mob that Trump encouraged. And so, like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not very good at thinking like a Republican senator. But if I were a Republican senator, I hope the way that I would think would be, I don't actually know how the politics of this are going to play out. Like, maybe if I vote to convict, then like nothing happens to me. Maybe I get primary challenge and I lose my seat. Maybe Trump is so toxic by the time that it comes time for me to run again, that I actually am a profile in courage and I'm more likely to win. Like, I don't know how the politics are going to play out, but I do know that this guy encouraged a mob to like potentially threaten my life.
Yeah.
And so, if it's me, like, I am anti people threatening my life. I'm anti lynching generally. And I am particularly against people lynching me. Yeah. So if someone tries to lynch me, I would want there to be a consequence for them. And if someone encourages a lynch mob, I would want there to be a consequence as well.
Well, Buddy, and think about what you just said. If they were trying to lynch senators and other Republicans who had yet to even have an impeachment trial, they don't need a vote on impeachment to try to lynch them. In other words, even if they don't go through with this, what's to prevent that from happening again? And what's to prevent him from encouraging it again? And could this not be? Because I think this was kind of the thing with Nixon. I mean, maybe it was unwritten. I mean, it was sort of a plea deal. You resign, you get pardoned. That's another thing that I thought maybe should have happened. But in this case, it could be sort of a Pete Rose type situation. In exchange for you agreeing to no longer run for office, we'll table this thing, it'll go away. Now, I don't know what would make Trump keep his word. But couldn't there be sort of a plea bargain in a situation like this? Don't they really have the authority to handle the Senate any way they want to?
I mean, I think the question is whether such an agreement would be enforceable. Because, like, normally the way that plea bargains work is that there are three parties involved. There's the prosecutor, there's the defendant, and then there's the court. And, like, after the prosecutor and the defendant reach an agreement about what that plea bargain is going to say, the court then enters an order, and that's an enforceable order to make sure that everyone complies with the terms of that plea bargain. And I just don't know of a precedent for a plea bargain being used in the impeachment context. So like, I just don't know if that's something that could be on the table. But like, to go back to your first question about there has to be a consequence here. I began my career as a school teacher. And like one thing I was taught, when I was learning to be a school teacher is that if a kid shows out on you, you need to nip that in the bud right away. If you got a kid talking back to you, like my first day of class, I called a lot of people's parents after the first day of school and just told them, look, like, your kid was up and you're showing out, and that's not allowed in my classroom. And like, they need to understand that. Right. And that set the tone for the whole year. Now, the same rule that applies to the kid who talks without raising their hand, or, the kid who spits a spitball or something like that, should also apply to a president of the United States that incites a violent mob. Like this shouldn't be hard. The phrase you often hear in the criminal justice context is that punishment needs to be swift and certain. And, for something like this, you can't necessarily make it incredibly swift because there's a process that needs to play out. But if Trump, I think a big reason why Trump did this is because he got away with it once. There was a first impeachment trial where he tried to interfere with an election. Nothing happened to him. And if he continues to think that nothing will happen to him, he's going to continue to misbehave.
Yeah. You're right, by the way. Putsch is German, but I don't know. I was thinking Russian for obvious reasons. But this is very interesting. It's also going to be interesting to see how the media covers this, whether this too inadvertently gives him another sort of platform to defend himself somehow. It'll be really interesting to see how this unfolds. I don't mind it either. I mean, you sometimes you need things like this too to challenge the boundaries of the Constitution, or if there even are any boundaries. What's there. I think it's a worthwhile exercise, not only for the reason you said, for the punishment, but just to find out what really this democracy is supposed to be about and what it's supposed to be. Because you can't have people do that. Just incite an overthrow, especially one based on a lie. If we wanted to overthrow the government because of racism, that's real.
Right.
If people even had held a nonviolent demonstration about not getting enough stimulus, what could anybody have said? These fools didn't even bring it up. They didn't even go up there and say, hey, we mad at y'all about the election. But you know what? Hey, we didn't get a stimulus check either. They didn't even think about that. Because if they said that, people would have been like, well, wait a minute now. Part of what they're saying makes sense. But they were not even concerned about something real and tangible. And it also speaks to the role, the ever-growing role disinformation has in our society. That we're not dealing with facts, we're dealing with disinformation. What? I just don't even if those guys are afraid to do the 2/3, I cannot see what a single senator could say in defense of Donald Trump at a trial, a Republican too.
Yeah.
What can they say?
Yeah, I mean, and for that reason, because the facts are so clear here, I mean, we all know what he said. We all saw what the mob did. I suspect that this constitutional argument, this claim that it is unconstitutional to proceed with an impeachment trial against a former official, I think that's going to play a big role just because it's the best argument that Trump's defenders have.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's not, I mean, I don't agree with it. I think that the weight of scholarship and of history and the text of the Constitution, I think that the better argument is that a former official can be impeached, but it's not a frivolous argument. And if you don't care what the law says, if all you're looking for is an excuse to vote to acquit, this is a good excuse.
Yeah, this will be very interesting. I know you'll be watching this very, very closely. Now, do I also understand, this is another interesting thing, the Chief Justice, is it true, is not presiding over this?
That's correct. Yeah, it was announced today that Pat Leahy, the president pro tempore of the Senate, will preside. And I think that's right. So the Constitution says that the Chief Justice shall preside over a impeachment of the president. But Joe Biden is the president. Donald Trump is not the president anymore. And so, if this had happened last week, if it happened before January 20, then Chief Justice Roberts would have presided. But if it's not the sitting president, then this is just like any other impeachment trial, and it will be presided over by, a senior senator.
Interesting. Well, we will see. And of course, we'll be watching this very, very closely.
All right.
Ian Millhiser, folks, check him out at Vox. He is a prolific writer on the courts and the Constitution. And again, he knows his stuff. So check him out and follow him on Twitter as well. Thank you, as always, Ian.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, subscribe, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.
Hey, I'm Andy. If you don't know me, it's probably because I'm not famous. But I did start a men's grooming company called Harry's. The idea for Harry's came out of a frustrating experience I had buying razor blades. Most brands were overpriced, overdesigned, and out of touch. At Harry's, our approach is simple. Here's our secret. We make sharp, durable blades and sell them at honest prices for as low as $2 each. We care about quality so much that we do some crazy things, like buy a world-class German blade factory. Obsessing over every detail means we're confident in offering a 100% quality guarantee. Millions of guys have already made the switch to Harry's, so thank you if you're one of them. And if you're not, we hope you give us a try with this special offer. Get a Harry's starter set with a 5-blade razor, weighted handle, shave gel, and a travel cover, all for just $3 plus free shipping. Just go to harrys.com and enter code FACE at checkout. That's harrys.com, code FACE. Enjoy!